Let's get back to Johnny Fed here. Let's hear what he had to say.
John Fetterman from the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Senator, what is your reaction to Iran's attack on Israel, and how worried are you that this is the beginning of an open war between the two countries?
Well, a couple of things, actually. I think it really demonstrates how it's astonishing that we are not standing firmly with Israel, and there should never be any kinds of conditions on all that. When a nation can launch hundreds of drones towards Israel, and I'm not going to be talking about conditions ever. And second, I think that also was Iran had to have some fireworks after Israel smoked that Iranian general, and I'm here for that. And I think it's just a matter of theater, part of it as well too. And finally, it demonstrates how unstable things are and why we need to lean in and stand with Israel.
How do you think Israel should respond? Should Israel strike within Iranian territory, or are you concerned that that might only escalate matters further?
Well, I'm not going to suggest what Israel should or shouldn't do on that. But I also do think that Iran is pleased with, they have enough of money on the table with all of its proxies all around in the region as well, too. And Iran certainly can't take on Israel, and certainly not us. So I think they would just like to keep things as they go. And then after they made a point back, I think they could go pretty quiet and go back to just using their proxies.
What does the Mossad have on Fetterman? Nothing, bro. He's just, dude. He got hit with the stroke gun that makes you more pro-Israel than you were before.
Senior administration official tells CNN that President Biden told Prime Minister Netanyahu that the U.S. will not participate in any offensive operations against Iran. Do you think that's the right call?
He is literally more to the right than like most Republicans, bro. I swear to God.
Or should direct U.S. military action, as some of your colleagues in the Senate are suggesting, should that be on the table?
I don't agree with that, and I'm just think we should follow and have Israel's back in the situation. I don't agree with the president. That doesn't change anything that he's a fantastic president, and I'm proud to stand with him and campaign for him and vote for him.
Marco Rubio was just on the show, and he said the White House leaking the fact that Biden told Netanyahu not to directly respond, to take the win, quote unquote, was offensive to him, because it seemed to suggest that it's Biden trying to appease the far left in his party. What's your response?
Well, I don't know. I mean, the president is entitled to his own views and whatever he decides to do. But I would never capitulate to the fringe. I'll never pander to that.
Yeah, the fringe. Which, by the way, the fringe is always changing. On October 8, many people had John Fetterman's brain broken attitude, and yet the fringe has shifted dramatically, right? I mean, now he's fringe. His takes have turned fringe over the course of the past couple of months as Israel's continuously and relentlessly blown up Palestinian children. So I don't know why he's like, oh, this is a fringe attitude. This is a fringe attitude.
As well. In fact, that helps, that empowers Hamas. And Hamas they're actually convinced that they are winning the PR war. And they're never going to negotiate at this point. They think that they're going to hold on to the very end. And I know why they're not willing to provide any kind of proof of life. And I don't know why there's not more of that conversation in the media. Like, what about the hostages? What's happened to them? Where are they now? And let's just bring them home. And then all of the harsh words should be directed at.
How credible do you think are Israel's claims that they aren't seeking war after this? Bro, what do you mean? Who in Israel is saying that they aren't seeking war? Everything that I've seen thus far from Gilad Erdan earlier today, all the way from the war cabinet, all the way to high-ranking Israeli officials is literally, let's go bomb Iran immediately. I have not heard any Israeli be like, yeah, it's time for restraint now. Except for, obviously, Ofer Kasif. But, he is fringe for Israeli politics, unfortunately, even though he is right.
I always thought you were an anti-racist, but it seems like you value Israeli lives more than you value Palestinian lives. Is that true?
Still with Israel.
Dude, he looks like just utterly humiliated and defeated. I'm still with Israel.
So you think an Israeli life is more valuable than a Palestinian life?
Okay.
Oh, I know this has been said before, but the whole wear shorts and a hoodie and all weather condition shtick is old as now, and it's just cringe. Yeah, we just fucking hate him for his takes. That's why, it just looks way worse now. He's so awful that I am now firmly committed to the QAnon conspiracies that he got a head transplant.
Hamas, which started this and now continues to hold all of over 100 Israeli hostages.
Far right and way off the map. If there's a basic international law alignment even with Biden, he should be ostracized, and we should all push for peace. Yep, he's got nothing. And one of those people that's very aware of the Democratic majority for Israel's PAC activity is a big towering lieutenant governor of Pennsylvania, who is now a senator, John Fetterman.
Yeah.
And I think that's a important thing to recognize and talk about as well, because a lot of people ask, what the happened to John Fetterman? Like, he was always like iffy on Israel, but it's usually a position that I'm like understanding of, because I know that you can't really say too much and not get hammered. So I always thought that he was just deflecting, or he was just basically saying like, yeah, I'm pro-Israel, whatever, who cares? Like,
just don't nuke me over.
Yeah,
this.
please don't own me. And it turns out, no, he got that.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened to him. He got the head transplant.
Yeah, it's like we can explain like 50 to 60% of it, but I don't think all of it. But the 50 to 60% of it is in the book, and it's a wild story. He's got what's his name? It was a right-wing congressman from this Pittsburgh suburbs who was running also for Senate. And that guy, he was like a very Rahm Emanuel 2006, 2008 right-wing Democrat. Connor Lamb.
Oh, yeah, Connor Lamb. Yeah.
So it's Connor Lamb against John Fetterman.
Who, by the way, outflanked Fetterman the other day, which was crazy. Anyway.
I bet it's a little bit of bitterness from what I'm about to talk about. So his campaign was 10, 20 points down, and he's running out of money because he's completely backed by big donors. And at a certain level, you tap out those max donors. Like, those rich people have more money, but they can only give it to a super PAC. They can't give it directly to you. So he puts out a couple of memos where he's like, look, I'm going to lose to Fetterman unless a super PAC comes in. And here's how much a super PAC needs to spend. Here's where they need to spend it. Here are the messages that work on Fetterman. The thing with the gun where he like pulled a shotgun on a black guy. First, like that's a very clean and fair hit at the time. And you think back and then you're like, oh yeah, actually, huh?
No, I think that was like, I think in Pennsylvania it could go in either direction. I remember analyzing it at the time, and I was like, well, what are they trying to get him to definitely win? Because like rural Pennsylvania
is like,
rural Pennsylvania's gonna look at that and be like, oh yeah, no, I love this guy. What do you mean he tried to shoot a black jogger with a shotgun, thinking he was like a shooter? Yeah, I'm going to vote for him extra hard.
So Connor Lamb's putting out these memos, and while Connor Lamb is putting out these memos, the key super PAC in question here is DMFI, but then AIPAC is also spending $30+ million that cycle as well. But they're kind of following DMFI's guidance. DMFI working with some other big money PACs, but they're the ones that are like calling the shots. And the other PACs told me this on the record for the book, that like, we were just following DMFI's guidance. So like they have a name like Mainstream Democrats PAC, which is funded by Reid Hoffman, the LinkedIn billionaire. And they're like, we just, whatever DMFI tells us to do. They're smart. We just do that. So John Fetterman's campaign sits down with DMFI, and they're like, what do we need to do, for this not to happen? And so they have their meeting about Israel-Palestine. Fetterman's campaign sends DMFI there, and they've talked about this is all on the record. They send them the platform. Here's our Israel-Palestine situation. DMFI is like, this is good, but it could be better. And they like make edits and like kick it back. And then the Fetterman campaign stamps it. And then Fetterman agrees to do an interview with this really a good news outlet. Good in the sense like they get a lot of scoops. Jewish Insider. There's a couple really good reporters there whose work I follow, because it's like kind of on the other side of my beat. And so he volunteers to do an interview. And you often see you saw Katie Porter like right before her California race. Like it's like you have to do an interview with Jewish Insider and talk about what you think of BDS, talk about what you think of conditioning aid to Israel. Like those are the key things.
Yeah.
And so he goes on and he's like, and he doesn't even get asked about a couple other things. And he's like, I just want to, even if I'm not asked, he's like, I just want to say, like, I find BDS to be horrific, immoral. He's like, I'm not progressive on this issue, was like one of his quotes.
Nice.
Like, because the lead of the article Jewish Insider is like, John Fetterman is often lumped in with the squad, and so there's been concern among the pro-Israel community that he shares the squad's politics when it comes to Israel-Palestine. But he assures Jewish Insider that he does not. And then they just quote him, bang, bang, bang. And and he talks about, like, there had recently been that Iron Dome vote. He's like, I thought that was appalling and outrageous. So you could see him laying it on extra thick in that interview.
Yeah.
So he was already kind of there. And now he's also getting squeezed from both sides. Somebody like Omar, AOC, Tlaib, etc., they only have to worry about a Democratic primary. Whereas for Fetterman, they've got 2 shots to knock him off. They've got the Democratic primary, and then AIPAC could also come in and back, because DMFI can't back the Republican, but AIPAC can come in and could spend enormous amounts of money on a Republican to beat him in Pennsylvania. So he has extra incentive, or extra vulnerability.
And it kind of failed, because it seems like Dr. Oz told the Republican Jewish Coalition that Fetterman was okay with pressuring Israel to respect the elemental human rights of its Palestinian citizens and non-citizen subjects. Fetterman was clarifying that he's not okay with any such thing, which is insane. Like, they were doing a race to the bottom where, like, Dr. Oz,
human rights.
Dr. Oz is like, dude, Fetterman thinks Palestinians are human, and then John Fetterman was like, no, I don't. I don't think that they're human. I think that they're actually.
I will go on the record right now.
Which is crazy. Like, that is, God,
that link to Jewish Insider.
I fucking hate American politics so much sometimes. It's just, like, so gross.
Yeah, he was okay with pressuring Israel to respect the elemental human rights of its Palestinian citizens and non-citizen subjects. Fetterman was clarifying that he's not okay with any such thing.
And that he had an unwavering commitment to Israel's security, and that he was in favor of additional military assistance without any additional conditions. So overall, it's like, I thought, Harvard guy, very hard to shake that off. You know what I mean? Like, that was always a thing in the back of my mind. Like, technically he is like a Harvard guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He presents himself a certain way, but he still has that background.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, he grew up pretty rich.
Yeah. So that in and of itself, I always thought would, like, may come up as a issue down the line potentially.
Like, does he have, like, what are his class politics?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But he was always pretty consistently solid on labor in general. But I think that is the progressive accept Palestine thing comes into mind immediately in this situation, except he's gone above and beyond, like way above and beyond what he's like outflanking Nadler at this point. You know what I mean? The are you doing? Like,
he's like the furthest.
You have like a calcified senator or a congressperson, and even they're like, dude, this is ridiculous. Like, the anti-Semitism equals anti-Zionism stuff is, like, out of control. There are literally, like, there are Jews that would be considered anti-Semitic under this ridiculous
Israel
messaging bill
born in 1948.
Yeah,
like anti-Semitism is thousands of years old, and
the resolution that you were talking about the other day that passed with 14 no's, which we'll see what happens. We'll see what comes of that. But it's I mean, he is. It's pretty awful that he took this, like, super hardline, super militant stance in his, like, pro-Israel position. I'm shocked at how above and beyond he went. I think there's a really interesting analysis here from Edingermentum, where he says, when I did research about him during the Fettermania 2 months ago, he had one thing I kept finding throughout his career was a reliance on personal branding above all else. This makes him completely impossible to move on issues where he decides his stances on a whim. He goes, his basis for his entire brand is being unapologetic and antagonizing about things he believes in. What he's doing now with the Israeli flag is almost the exact mirror image to the thing he did when he was lieutenant governor, where he hung a gay weed flag over the PA state capitol. So that's fine and dandy if you're doing it for, like, American issues, if you're doing it for an issue where you're, like, definitely progressive on. But if you're doing it on a more contentious issue, especially one that pertains to defending genocide, a lot of progressives are going to see that and go, what the are you doing?
Yeah, so the argument here would be he's going for a, like, you might not agree with me, but you understand that I'm, a man of principle, which is undercut by that whole, like, here, can you edit my policy position on Israel-Palestine? But yeah.
And then you arrive at things like this. John Fetterman was asked on, I believe, CNN about human rights abuses. Here is a CNN interview with John Fetterman with Abby Phillips. Do you believe that anything that Israel has done in these 6 weeks of fighting has amounted to a war crime? Here's John Fetterman's answer.
Extraordinary civilian death toll that has happened as a result of this war. Do you believe that anything that Israel has done in these 6 weeks of fighting has amounted to a war crime?
Of course not. Of course not. And it's like, let's not forget what Hamas started.
Of course not.
So he didn't realize that the extra evil-based answer would have been, of course, but I support whatever they need to do.
Yeah.
Like that's the which is more of the Ted Cruz response. Like, get out of here with the entire idea that they would be subject to international law.
Yeah.
Is offensive to me. But yeah, he's like, of course not.
He's doing,
which is just like,
I think this is the Richie Torres dynamic playing out once again, where they're like Streisand affecting a lot of the shit that Israel does by offering unconditional riding support. Okay, so here's the thing though. Richie Torres, when he equated the Jewish space laser anti-Semitic conspiracy to West Bank checkpoints and Jewish only streets in the West Bank, he did this wonderful thing that ended up backfiring and causing more people to know the truth about the West Bank. And John Fetterman is doing that here as well when he goes on the defensive and turns around and says like, no, Israel hasn't done any war crimes. One, he looks like a buffoon, and two, more people go, wait a minute, I don't know if that's the case, and then they investigate a little bit further. So
yeah, I feel like Torres, because he deleted that one of those posts eventually. I think he got I think somebody talked to him. It might even have been Jeremy, who Ben Ami, who he was attacking Jeremy. He's like, who was the founder of J Street, because Jeremy came in. Jeremy came in and he's like, I sponsored the trip that Jamal Bowman went on to the West Bank, and everything he said is true. And Torres comes back to him like, well, then your trip is just producing hate in people. And he's like, how dare you? And then lists his whole life.
And he literally was like, listen, my grandparents literally killed Palestinians. Okay, do you understand?
Yeah, like in a proto-terror group, like ahead of the
how dare you say that? They did terrorism to Palestinians. How dare you?
So he deleted that because I think, I wonder if he was like, why didn't I get to see this? Like, because he's taken at least one trip to sponsored by AIPAC, probably more. And I wonder if part of him was like, wow, I was lied to. Like you don't trust that I could like see what they're doing in the West Bank and still support you? Because it did that. I would imagine that's why somebody would be like, hey, they back off of this one, because this is not good turf for us. Like let's move back to October 7th.
Yeah.
Like, let's not talk about what's going on.
But that's like so transparently the method here. They constantly recycle back to, well, remember October 7th? Remember the massacres? They were devastating. And it's like at a certain point, once it's 2 months in and you've done an October 7 almost every fucking day for the past month, people are going to be like, okay, well, what the fuck are you doing? What are you doing?
Yeah. I see. Haaretz has the total of civilians slaughtered at 820 on October 7th, and
the total is still 1,200. It was originally 1,400. It got reduced because 200 of those were charred corpses of Palestinian militants that they could not identify appropriately at first, so it went down to 1,200. But 820, I believe, is civilians,
which is 820 too many. Israel killed 700 yesterday?
Yeah,
or the day before? 700 too many.
Exactly.
But if you're not talking about the 700, but you are talking about the 800.
So and the assessment, the damage assessment on like their targeting, like more information is coming out on Israel's targeting capabilities. We already know about the Dahiyya doctrine. I've talked about it quite a bit, but like the 972 magazine investigative reporting showed
if a 3-year-old gets killed in a building, it's because somebody made a decision that her life was worth sacrificing for whatever the target was. That's from the 972 article. And sometimes that target is just what they call a power center. By power, they mean like a big building, like an apartment complex.
No, specifically, there's 4 tiers of targeting that that Israel engages in, and the last 2 tiers are basically like a direct Hamas operation, like a tunnel or something. Okay, the one above that is actually still a civilian target where like a Hamas militant may or may not be living alongside other civilians, and then the other 2 targets are directly just straight up civil society places, like specifically to break the will of the Palestinian people under no uncertain terms. Like they very openly blow up universities, mosques, hospitals, schools deliberately so that they hope that like the Palestinians will turn on Hamas.
That was the 1982 plan in Lebanon to destroy so much Lebanese civil society that the Lebanese would kick the PLO out of Lebanon. Be like, look, like you're the same way that you make life miserable for the Taliban, so they kick Osama bin Laden. But that's different. They're going after the actual Taliban. Like what Israel was doing, going after civilians. So that civilians would tell Arafat, you need to go to Tunisia or somewhere else because this is causing us too much trouble.
Yeah.
And that was the explicit strategy. Enough civilian misery that the civilians turn against the PLO. Now they're trying to do it with Hamas, which is so much more embedded into the just kind of fabric of Gaza society.
And what only ends up happening in that situation is like you create more radicalization and a more hardliner stance towards
because
even more reactionary.
Because the PLO could actually literally get on boats and disperse, which is what ended up happening. That's not really. I don't understand how you could possibly do that with Hamas.
Yeah, but also there's a secondary part of that. When you destroy civil society, you create volatility,
more
which
gangs.
will then then you have the Hezbollah
Yes.
rising to power.
That's
and
where Hezbollah comes from.
and being
exactly.
and being seen as like liberators to many parts of Lebanese society for that purpose. So like you're never going to be able to deal with things like this militarily. It has never happened, in my opinion, in the history of counterinsurgency.
Unless it's a complete ethnic cleansing, like the Tamil Tigers, that situation where they cornered like 60,000 civilians, and inside there are like 5,000 remaining Tamil Tigers, and they just killed everybody.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, okay, well,
if you don't do that, if you don't do full blown ethnic cleansing, you are never going to be able to squash the will of the people.
The world didn't say shit about that, and that I think is.
But that's also different in the sense that like it's not directly being filmed every single day on American news and on TikTok and on independent outlets,
being done to people with that we now have parasocial relationships with.
Yeah, exactly. Like so many Palestinian journalists that are documenting their lives every single day, and therefore there, and also our connection to Israel as well as our most important strategic ally in the region. Like because there's also currently ongoing campaigns in Burma, in Myanmar, right? You have rebel groups that are fighting against the military, and there was an ethnic cleansing campaign against Muslims there beforehand as well. And like the reason why it is not as in your face, or is not something that like Americans are paying attention to like it happened the last time even, is because the American connection and the American involvement is not as personal in that situation.
Yeah, Americans don't care about anything going on around the world, so there's a really high bar. Like our direct involvement has to be extremely intense.
Yeah, so that's something to consider here. If you're like confused as to why people don't care about
they broke the first ceasefire, and then they attacked Israel and murdered over 1,200 innocent women, children, babies, everything, and brutalized it in the most unspeakable kinds of ways. And so that really is the ultimate, criminal war kinds of. This is absolutely an unequivocal attack to destroy Israel. And we must remember that that's how started all of this.
But are you comfortable, Senator, with the number of Palestinians who have lost their lives? 7,000 children.
By the way, you didn't get banned. You got auto-modded by Fossabot Concrete for the record, because your piece was too long. Gave you a fair chance and watched today instead of just going by what others said, but you totally proved their criticism right. Israel's doing on October 7 every day is so obviously disingenuous. If you haven't noticed, Hamas places centers of operations by, in, and under the hospitals and schools you're acting like they destroy just to annoy Palestinians. It's wild seeing your self-admitted propaganda evolve in the face of contradicting evidence. I'm going to be as charitable as humanly possible to you and say that you are probably unaware of the actual Israeli magazine that we were referencing, Plus 972, in Israel's targeting capabilities and like how they assess certain targets to blow up. It's the Dahia doctrine that Ryan also mentioned that started off Israel's bombing campaigns that deliberately targeted civic buildings, continued onwards into its many sieges inside of Gaza. And the real reasons as to why they do that is specifically to annoy the Palestinians into, and this is the same principle behind why America does sanctions, even though it's an act of collective punishment, and oftentimes fails unless it's our allies, to create an environment that is so unsustainable that like the population then turns on its elected leadership or dictators or whoever, right? And it doesn't work. Obviously, it's I think that is a falsehood. That is a false reason to just do ethnic cleansing, because I think Israel's opinions are pretty clear on on this. Like, there are enough Knesset members, enough people in positions of power on the Israeli military that has openly stated that they are interested in raising Gaza as an act of vengeance, but also so they can take it over and annex it almost entirely. So
yeah, I think this concrete guy, whatever his name was, should go read this story, log off, go read this story, report back then if he thinks that we're being unfair here.
I banned and unbanned him. Hopefully he will. Hopefully he'll stay in here and give it a fair shake. But yeah,
but listen to what they tell you when they tell you what they're doing. Like, they're being explicit. They're being clear in the Israeli media. And don't listen to the U.S. politicians about what Israel is doing, because they're not. They're just completely changing what is being said by the Israeli politicians.
Yeah, I mean, there is an operation here. Obviously, like, the Israel Foreign Ministry is pretty openly interested in massaging the narrative and contextualizing their acts of violence every single day. That's why you have like Mark Regev and almost famous figures like the Concreus guy, whatever the fuck Frankenstein looking motherfucker. What's his name? Concreus?
But yeah, you've got to look at what they say to Israeli media, because Israeli public opinion at this point is full of bloodlust, is full of the demand for revenge. Netanyahu is hanging by his political skin of his teeth, or whatever the phrase is, because his entire life in politics, he's been, I'm the guy that's going to protect Israel. And I'm the guy who's going to stop a Palestinian state. I'm going to manage a never-ending conflict. And he didn't manage it. He did not manage it. And so he moved a bunch of troops north. He overlooked all of these like very clear intelligence assessments, and so he is getting punished. He also is facing potential prison if he leaves office. Which is wild.
Oh, I think it restarted actually. He is so deeply unpopular. On 9/12/2001, or at least like a month into 9/11, there were polls conducted that saw what we now call a rallying around the flag effect around George W. Bush. George W. Bush had what, like a 90% approval rating at the time. In the immediate aftermath of October 7th, the security candidate Benjamin Netanyahu, who's run time and time again on saying he's the guy who will keep Israelis secure, had an 85% disapproval rating. That is historic.
So he's feeding what he thinks the Israeli public wants, which is vengeance against Gaza, so that he can like somehow recover politically, or at least live another day, extend his political career, and see what shakes out next. And so the things that they're telling the Israeli public are the truth about what they're doing, and the Israeli public is cheering that on.